What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Black History Nuggets. We are on episode 7, and I hope that you had an opportunity to check out the first 6 episodes. We are continuing to unpack biblical Black history over this entire month. Why is this important? Because we need to know our history prior to 1619. Prior to 1619, typically when we are talking about Black history, we are talking about history from 1619 moving forward as if we don't have a history before then. And so uh, over this next month, we are unpacking Black history from the biblical context. And so I hope that you had an opportunity to go and look at the previous episodes. If you have not, please go back and look at the previous episodes. We are building a foundation here, and so it is important for you to understand some of the first points before you get here. And so some of the things we may be talking about in this episode, if you don't understand what was talked about before, it may not really make sense. And so we're building something here, and we're going to get to where we're trying to get to at least by the end of this month. And so I pray that this is a blessing for you as we are uncovering the truth about Black history in the Bible. And so we're going to continue uh, with our study of Black history, and we're going to start here, and we're going to talk about probably one of the greatest lies ever told, and that is that people of color are a small minority in Scripture. Uh, but in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, it tells us, now this is the Shulamite woman speaking. She says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Look not upon me, because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. And so we see that this woman was a black woman. Then in Exodus chapter 2, Moses is on the run after killing an Egyptian. When he gets to Midian, he comes across a group of shepherds that are harassing Jethro's daughters. After defending them, they get home and they tell their father that an Egyptian protected them. And in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 19, it says, and they said, an Egyptian delivered us from the hand of the shepherds, and he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock. Now, to be clear, Egyptians were black. They weren't like what we see today. Today, they were actually black. And how do we know that? We know that because, I mean, they drew themselves. They drew themselves. And when they drew themselves, they had the color white, but they chose to use the color dark brown. So we know that they were people of color. Then, when you go to Exodus chapter 4, when God calls Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, Moses is afraid because he doesn't think the people are going to believe him. So God gives him these 3 signs to prove to the people that God sent him. One of the signs, or one of the miracles, was him turning his hand white. And so in Exodus chapter 4 and verse 6, it says, furthermore, the Lord said to him, now put your hand in your bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Now, if the whole point of the sign was to prove to the children of Israel that God sent him, why would they be impressed by him turning his hand white if it was already white? The reason they would be impressed is because Moses' hand was not white, it was black. And since Moses was a black man, that means that the first 5 books of the Bible were written by a black man. First 5 books of the Bible were written by a black man. Now, the theologians won't tell you that. All of the Bible movies Hollywood puts out, they won't tell you that. But it's true. The reason they won't tell you that is because, they want to erase the historical and the ethnic realities of Scripture to promote the narrative that whiteness equals godliness. That whiteness equals purity, that whiteness equals chosenness, which is in actuality, it's an expression of white supremacy. It's the notion that, it has to be white to be any good. It has to be white to be any good. But I digress. So let's continue on. In Numbers chapter 12, when Moses' sister Miriam goes off on him for marrying an Ethiopian woman, and of course, Ethiopians were black and are black. The Bible says that God strikes her with leprosy and she becomes white as snow. And in Numbers chapter 12 and verse 10, it says, and when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous as white as snow. Now, this is the thing. If Miriam were already white, she was already white, why would God strike her and she become white? And to be clear, Miriam was not upset because Moses married a black woman, because Moses was also black. She was upset because he married an Ethiopian, and Moses was a Hebrew. It was somebody. It was like him marrying out of the faith. He was marrying someone of another faith. So it had nothing to do with her being black because both of them were black. In Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, the word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, the son of Amariah, the son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, the son of Amon, king of Judah, the word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi. So Zephaniah was the son of Cushi. Cushi was a term used to refer to those of Ethiopian origin that came from the land of Cush, which is modern day Ethiopia. That's why in some versions in Numbers chapter 12 and verse 1, when it mentions Miriam getting upset at Moses, it says that he married a Cushite woman, while some other versions say that he married an Ethiopian woman. Okay. Now, according to Genesis chapter 10 and verse 6, Cush was one of the sons of Ham. And it says the sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Ham, scholars will acknowledge, was the father of black people. Father of black people. So Zephaniah's father, Cushi, a descendant of Ham, would have been a black man. That means Zephaniah would have also been a black man. So the book of Zephaniah was written by a black man. In the book, a handbook on the book of Zephaniah, it says in the Old Testament, this name is usually found as an ethnic label meaning a person from Cush, the Upper Nile region, which included most of modern Sudan and part of Ethiopia. Here it may mean that Zephaniah's father was an African and that Zephaniah himself was a black man. This possibility gains some support from the fact that in his short prophecy, Zephaniah twice mentions the land or the people of Cush. So even scholars admit that Zephaniah was a black man. Scholars admit it. In Exodus chapter 4, in verses 24 and 25, Moses has a wife by the name of Zipporah. According to Numbers 12 and verse 1, as I just mentioned, she was an Ethiopian or Cushite. And since Ethiopians were black, it's obvious that Zipporah would have also been black. So if Zipporah was black, then her father Jethro, who was a Midianite, was also black. And in Exodus 2, verse 16, he's called the priest of Midian. So if Jethro was black, then his father Midian was black. If Midian was black, then his father Abraham would have been black as well because Midian was the son of Abraham. So Genesis 25, verse 2. Abraham again took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. So Abraham, Midian, Jethro, and Zipporah would have all been black. All of them would have been black. Then, that's not enough. Then you had Paul. You had the Apostle Paul. In Acts 21, verse 37, it says, then as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, may I speak to you? He replied, can you speak Greek? Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness? But Paul said, I am a Jew from Tarsus. So just like Moses, Paul was mistaken for an Egyptian. Now, why would he be mistaken for an Egyptian if Egyptians were black? It must have been because Paul was also black. And for those who don't know, Paul wrote over half of the New Testament. So you have Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. You have Paul, who wrote more than half of the New Testament. You have Zephaniah, who wrote his own book. You have according to Numbers 13, verse 8, you have Joshua, who was from the tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim was one of Joseph's sons with his Egyptian wife Asenath. Okay. Uh, in Genesis 41, it says, and to Joseph were born two sons before the years of famine came, from whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim. So Asenath was black because she was an Egyptian. You would also assume Joseph was black as well because his brothers didn't even recognize him when they went to Egypt to get grain during the famine. If Joseph was black, that means their son Ephraim would have also been black. If Ephraim was black and Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim, then Joshua would have also been black. That means the book of Joshua would have also been written by a black man. Interesting. Then, of course, you had Simon of Cyrene. Simon was the one who carried Jesus' cross in Matthew 27:32, which is probably, one of the only people that they will acknowledge was black. And for those who don't know, Cyrene was in North Africa, in the country we now call Libya. At that time, North Africa was inhabited by black people, which means that Simon would have also been black. This is also where Lucius of Cyrene is from. Lucius of Cyrene is spoken of in Acts 13, verse 1, and he's described as a prophet. In the same text, we find Simeon of Niger, who's also described as a prophet or teacher. Niger also means black, which means Simeon was most likely black. In Acts 13, verse 1, it says, now in the church that was at Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, who was called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. So these individuals would have all been people of color. They would have all been black. But we don't hear any of this in church, in our churches. We don't hear any of this. Now, mind you, I say we don't hear any of this in churches or whatever. Now, let me rephrase that. In some churches, very few. Okay. Now I'm a pastor, so and I preach this stuff. I talk about this stuff. But in the majority of churches, we don't hear this stuff. Why don't we hear it? Because a lot of people feel like it's not important. So who cares? Who cares if these people, are people of color? Not recognizing that, and we're going to get to Jesus in later on another episode, but the reality is this: when you understand that the people in the Bible look like you, did you know that we're the only ones as people of color, we're the only ones that quote unquote worship a God that doesn't even look like us? We're the only ones. We're the only ones that worship a God that doesn't look like us. The Asians, they worship a God that look like them. Of course, the Europeans. I mean, everybody worships a God that looks like them, except for us. Except for us. And that's where this whole a lot of this whole notion of white supremacy comes in, because we've been taught that everything that is holy, everything that is pure, has to be European. And so what would it be like? What would it be like if instead of seeing a white Jesus and a white Moses and a white Abraham, we actually began to picture Jesus as being a quote unquote black man, Moses as being a black man, Joshua as being a black man? How would it change our psyche if we understood and believed that the people in scripture actually look like us? Would it change how we viewed ourselves? I think it would. But you see, a lot of people, they don't think that this is important. It's okay. I mean, but see, this is the thing. Truth is always important. So if the children of Israel were not in Egypt, or in Egyptian bondage for 400 years, that should be important. If Moses was a black man, but he's always portrayed as a white man, but nobody says anything, that's important. All of this stuff is important. But for some reason, it's just preach Jesus. You can't just preach Jesus if you don't preach all of Jesus, all the truth. Jesus says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. A lot of us are in bondage right now because we don't have truth. We don't have truth. But I digress. Thank you so much for watching, tuning in. I hope that this was eye-opening, and hope that you had an opportunity. If you have not, please go back and look at some of the other episodes, and we will see you tomorrow as we unpack some more of these Black History Nuggets.